Well, welcome everybody. My name is Matt McIlwain. I'm a managing director at the Madrona Venture Group. And just to take a minute before introducing the panel, we have three terrific speakers, senior executives at their respective companies. This panel's on the concept or the idea of intelligent applications. And so you might say, well, what is an intelligent application? And I think one of the most important ideas here is that, at least we believe at Madrona, that software by itself is effectively dead. And that every application in the future is going to have data that comes from data silos brought together into a data lake. You're going to train machine learning models with that and embed it in some kind of a contextually relevant way. And as a result, you're going to have a disruptive software and dataware model that's going to disrupt whatever industry you're going after. So that's the concept of intelligent applications. Last year, we got 50 of our friends in the venture capital community to nominate some of the best companies in this area. These are the best private companies in the intelligent application space. We had hundreds and hundreds of nominations and a voting and a methodology. We just announced that we're going to be partnering more deeply with PitchBook this year on the methodology. And we ended up having 40 companies, 10 that are more enablers, companies like OctoML and Databricks and DataRobot, and then 30 companies of sort of small, medium, and large size that are intelligent application businesses themselves. And I'm very delighted to introduce these three speakers. They are all from companies that are doing amazing things. Two of the three are actually intelligent application winners. And by the way, you may hear the sirens going by over the course of the day. And I've confirmed that that is all the hedge fund guys getting taken away to the hospital. It's been a really rough couple of weeks for them. But for now, we're going to start with Robert Wobby to give a little introduction to himself and his company, HighSpot.
Hi everyone, my name is Robert Wobby. I'm the CEO of a company called HighSpot. We are a SaaS application, an intelligent application, and our job is to help improve the performance of sales teams as measured by things like quota attainment, pipeline generation, ramp time. And so we use a whole raft of different kinds of AI and different workflows to help improve the performance of sales teams, and we get really kind of amazing results. So in terms of quota attainment, 20% more people achieve their quota after using the technology and the platform. Ramp time goes down by 25%. Pipeline generation, which is the lifeblood of most companies, goes up by 15%. And that's using the workflows and the data, collecting it, as Matt said, and then using some intelligent AI, which hopefully we'll talk about today.
Anoop.
Hi, I'm Anoop Gupta, co-founder and CEO of SeekOut. We believe that talent is the lifeblood of any company, and people have been talking a lot about change. I think that's true today. That's going to be true 5 years from now, and that's going to be true 20 years from now. We help companies recruit, retain, and redeploy and grow their talent. So the foundation is that to do this well is that you have to understand employees. Most companies don't have an idea of who they even have today because the data is in silos, data is not aggregated, data is not intelligent, data is not then providing the insights. So SeekOut helps in that, all of those things. We are used by 6 of the 10 most highly valued companies in the US, amongst lots and lots of other customers in these areas. So if you are a CEO or if you're a portfolio manager and you got amazing companies in the portfolio, I think this is an opportunity to have them talk to us.
Mike?
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Zinne. I'm Chief Customer Officer at Outreach. Outreach is a sales engagement platform, so we are focused on making more effective sellers. So we're really focused on the activity and giving sellers the opportunity to correspond with their customers in a great way. So part of what we use data for is we're looking at all the different activities that sellers are doing across the sales cycle. We're looking at their emails, calls, phone, LinkedIn touches, et cetera, and trying to use that data in ways that are going to help them achieve more goals, better quota retention, achieve deeper pipeline, and really grow their sales. So we're doing that through developing a lot of predictability tools that are going to take those signals and drive to specific outcomes. We've seen great customers in both the enterprise all the way down to small business, and seen some really terrific attainment from our customers, growing their pipelines by massive percentages, growing their specific outcomes of deals in a great way, and also getting their reps enabled in a faster way. So really focused on driving that seller workflow and making a more efficient sales cycle for our customers.
Hey, Mike, why don't we stick with you and go a little bit deeper? What makes outreach, from a perspective of the data and the data silos, dig a little bit more into some of those sources that you pull from, and then how do you use machine learning to differentiate your product versus the legacy players?
Yeah, so legacy players have had a tendency to sort of take in data about a specific person. So they're gonna store that data, your name, your phone number, those types of things. They're gonna store the opportunity, but what we're gonna really look at is the correspondences, those activities that a seller is doing with their customers, how they're operating in that buying cycle. And then we're going to use those activities to drive predictability. So the AI is really going to look at those activities, compare those to the millions of activities that we have inside of our data lake, and then create things like predictability scores. So how is your deal health doing? Are you going to is that deal progressing in a way that is consistent with other deals that are progressing in a similar way that have had great outcomes for you? We do things like understanding the sentiment of a specific response from a set of customers. So driving towards positive sentiment. So is much more of a differentiated sort of metric than things like reply rates or open rates, things that have historically been tracked as successful metrics. We're now able to go more deeper into the sentiment analysis, understand the quality of those responses, and use that as mechanisms to adjust our cycles and give sellers the information to go adjust their buying, their sort of selling cycles.
Anoop?
Yeah, so the foundation is that companies are drowning in data of all sorts, but when it comes to data about their people, they're woefully lacking, right? So the AI and ML is used in every stage of the cycle. So the first thing is, how do you bring data together? So if you're bringing LinkedIn public profiles, you're getting the developers from GitHub, you're getting papers patents from open jobs, you're getting the security clearances, you're inferring diversity. All of this means you're getting a lot of data all together. And this is not an easy task. It's like customer 360 you might think about. You're getting lots of signals about the customers. How do you build an aggregated view of it? The next layer you think about is, how do you provide predictive insights about the candidates, right? So if you're inside a company, you say, how do you know that this employee has high likelihood of leaving the company? What are the signals you can get? Maybe they have been 3 years in a job and they haven't gotten a salary increase, or their trajectory is much faster than the other people. So there are a lot of signals that are happening, but the signals are not in your Workday or your HRIS. You got to look at signals across many, many different sources of information to figure out what is going to happen. So across the layers, basically, you got to bring data together. You got to infer intelligently. For example, earlier there was a talk about ESG and diversity and how critical it is. So how do you know what diversity looks like at competitors? If you say, I want data scientists with 10 years of experience, what does the diversity look like in the talent pool? We can give you that, so you can set your targets, you can figure out the right parameters for the job descriptions, we can help you find the candidates, we can help you reduce unconscious bias, we can tell you in the talent pipelines, if 50 men and 50 women entered, what happened as they went eventually to the jobs, right? Means how many got the jobs, how many didn't, so you can fix the processes. So everything is about data and intelligence on top of it, so that you can recruit, retain, and really grow your talent.
And I want to come back a little bit later to this notion of public data and private data, or kind of your data that you have as first-party data. But let's give Robert a chance to talk a little bit about HighSpot. What makes HighSpot an intelligent application business?
Well, we have the same story. I think if you step back, what's happening is there's all of these roles in business that are now becoming digitized. So more of their actions, like for example, in your employee case, there's a thing called LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has a lot of signal. And before LinkedIn, you couldn't get that digital data to apply the AI. We're in the same business for sales. So sales has become incredibly digital. If you think about how you want to improve the performance of a team, it's the same thing you would do to improve the performance of a sports team. You're going to equip them with the right resources and the right plays. You're going to train and practice before you get in the game, and then you're going to coach during the game. Well, it turns out all that's very easy to do in this new world because it's all relatively digital. When they're getting their new resources, they're doing that online. When they're getting trained, they're doing those video challenges and those kinds of training online. They're taking the courses online. When you're coaching, you can coach on the actual calls because we're recording the calls, we're looking at the email, we're looking at the calendar. So really we have this 360 data set that you didn't have even 5 or 10 years ago, and it's the data that's unlocking the intelligent applications. It's not even the AI, it's much more the fact that the world's gone digital.
Digital data.
So we have this really unique data set. If you're a salesperson, we basically know everything that you're doing as part of your job. We know what you're reading. I mean, this is what the world is like now. We know what you're reading. We know what plays you're executing. We know what training you are supposed to take and what you've taken. We know what calls you're making, what kind of coaching we can do. So with all of that, you can imagine with sophisticated models, you can begin to understand what's working and what's not working. What are the best practices? How can you leverage those? So I think it's the same story across all three, which is the world's gone digital. We've aggregated that digital data, which is the hard part, getting all that to reconcile, and then applying various kinds of AI to answer various kinds of business questions.
So just to make it a little bit more concrete, who is your economic buyer in the company? And then what role does IT play as either an enabler or a disenabler of getting your solutions deployed into customers?
Want me to start?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have 3 buyers, which makes it tricky. Like I said, just the way you're going to help a sports team, you equip, you train, you coach for us. So we have 3 modules. Equip is mostly product marketing helping sales do their job. So we're selling to marketing mostly. If you're training and practicing, that's mostly a function called enablement. It's a relatively new function. It's a relatively new category, but it's also the fastest growing role on LinkedIn. So absolutely, people are understanding how important that is. And then if we're on the coaching side, it's to sales management and to sales operations. So we sell to all 3 of those at different stages as you begin to equip, train, coach. And all that has to be brought together. IT is there to make sure that we're compliant, and compliance is a massive big deal. We have very large customers, especially in Europe, and so GDPR and these other data compliance frameworks are front and center.
So this is more the data compliance.
It's all about, well, there's definitely a security level,
Yes.
but for example, for our biggest customers in Europe, adhering to their interpretation of GDPR, we can't have any personally identifiable information, PII, go from the EU to the US at all. So if you're training these data models and aggregating this data, you literally have to do it in region. And so if you want to do global analyses, you have to really be very careful about what you have the right and what you don't have the right to go do. So it's actually, data privacy will become one of the most important parts of intelligent applications in AI because data is the foundation of the AI.
Yeah, and on the 3 use cases, which is your usual land use case, or do they is it a little bit random?
No, it's definitely equip. And then
first.
train and then coach. Because what happens is, it's hard to train and coach in a vacuum.
Yep.
You want to train and coach against something. So you land the right plays and you land the right resources. Then they realize that people haven't really absorbed it. So they train. But just think about a football team or any other, your favorite sports team. You go to training camp, you run the plays, you get good at it, and then you get into the game and you're like, okay, that didn't go as well as we had hoped. Let's re-equip, retrain, and re-coach. And you do that digitally now, as opposed to doing that, what we used to do is walk the halls.
Great. Anoop, tell us about your customer, who's the economic buyer, and then the role of IT. I think we might hear something similar on that one as well.
Yeah, so our primary buyer today is the head of talent acquisition. at a company. This could be a VP, a senior director, whatever it might be. And so they say recruiting, it's a LinkedIn-like buy. They come and buy, and we sell to them. The second buyer is the head of HR or the CHRO. So increasingly, as we see the economic turmoil, when things go bad, and in some good way, people resume their attention to the employees, the talent they already have, and how to maximize the talent that is there. So that is the second big buyer that we have. IT is like an infrastructure, right? You go through the procurement people are there. IT is to make sure that hygiene is there on what data you have, how you manage it, what is the security, so InfoSec is a big part of it. But for us, those are the two economic buyers. Increasingly, we are also starting, instead of talent or HR up, to go from the business leader down. So you can have a conversation with the CTO, CIO, or even CEO. And they say, we are screwed, right? I mean, you say, what are we going to do? Because talent is a business problem. It is not a HR problem, right? Whether you're going to realize your vision or not, whether you're going to deliver to your shareholders, is a business leader problem. So that is a good way to encourage the HR, CHRO. That's a good way to get to the IT people, pay attention and get this part done. So those function too.
And similar, you tend to land with this, recruiting, kind of play that you have and solution that you have, but increasingly you're helping reposition employees inside the company into different roles, into opportunity spaces. I'm curious how you move from the first play into the second play, and is there different types of data that you've needed to use, more internal data for that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one is, there's this notion of internal mobility that people might talk about talent. How do they make progression? And in many companies, like at Uber, at General Dynamics, the vice president of talent acquisition is also a person responsible for internal mobility. That is, how do I offer opportunities to employees to discover that, our existing company is very exciting. There's lots of opportunity there that is not visible to them. So in some cases, it's easier. In some cases, we go CHRO and Chief People Officer down to go and talk about the scenarios. And there's certainly a lot of relevance that people are seeing in today's economic times. And the data is different. Sorry, I didn't answer. Because the outside data is all, public profiles, GitHubs, lots of things. Inside, you have data in your HRIS systems, the Workdays and the SAPs. You have in your learning management systems. But we are specialized. We can also look at data from your Salesforce. We can look at data from your enterprise GitHub on what developers are doing. And we can bring all of that data together to help companies understand their employees and what might be possible.
Mike, tell us a little bit about your economic buyer as well, and then I'm going to double down on this data question.
Yeah, sure. So very similar to Robert, we sell to sales, marketing, and sales operations. And we really have to have those three constituents aligned to support our solution. I think the interesting thing about sales too is you got to get the rep on board. Reps, especially the ones that are most successful, it's a very hard top-down motion for them to adopt technology. So you've got to get them excited about what you're doing and how you're going to help them and their workflow and help them drive themselves to success. So we spend a lot of time both sort of bottoms-up selling as well as kind of top-down selling in each one of those teams and groups. From an IT perspective, very similar. There's a lot of data requirements and security requirements that we have to adhere to, very similar to what Robert had mentioned. We're storing a lot of very sensitive data and content, and so we have to spend a lot of time with security folks and IT folks to get them comfortable with how we support that. But one of the first hires that our CEO made as he created the company was a chief security officer. So we have been really, really passionate about security, really passionate about the honor that we have have to store our customers' data, and we've created a lot of infrastructure to support that as well.
And I guess it goes without saying, all three of your businesses are software as a service businesses. It's just taken for granted these days. And then you've got this data piece that is the data that's the goal that's going to help you train the models that then you deploy into the systems. Tell us, how do you think about data rights? What kind of challenges do you have with that? And then how do you get this new kind of a solution onboarded inside your customers?
Yeah, so we have a couple areas and sort of thoughts in this area. Like the data that drives our AI is something that we're sort of storing, holding, and utilizing. But we also have a lot of data that talks about how active a rep is, how they're performing, how they're executing in their jobs, and that sort of rolls up to the manager, to the director, to the VP, and they want to be able to slice and dice that and drive their own outcomes. So we're working on technology where we can take this data and move that into their data warehouse so that they can use it to combine data sources with a bunch of different other applications in their business. So we believe that we want to empower them to run their business with data, and our data is critical to that. But then there's certain other data elements that are critical to our AI that we're going to store, keep, use, and monetize. I think the other great opportunity we have, and honestly we have as an industry, is really creating and understanding baselines and how best practices affect data elements and ultimate outcomes. And so we're looking at those types of ways of exposing some of those elements too.
Anoop?
So Kurt, if I actually may ask you a question, because you said go and ask
please,
questions.
do it.
Okay, so you have access to the email of your customers and clients. So there was a statement from Steve Ballmer when he was running Microsoft. So he said, if anybody wants any secret about Microsoft, the only thing they need is my email. Forget all the rest of the systems that you have. So that's a very sensitive, because you're not getting just about the sales transaction, you're getting access to the email system. How does it work?
Yeah, so we have governance capabilities so that you're only syncing correspondence between that. We've also have companies that have set up kind of multiple seller inboxes so that we can separate personal and private data from company specific data. But really we have some governance and controls in the application that give us limited access so that we don't have sort of full access to that data set. Yeah.
He's not reading your email.
At least not. Yeah.
We are a big customer of Outreach.
All right, so you've got these public data pieces, and then you've got these internal private data pieces, and you're building these models to help hire the best people.
Yeah.
How does that get ramped up inside a customer?
So one is the public data we have pre-gathered, about what folks have done, and that is super valuable to the people in the company. Then to the internal data, it's actually a negotiation with the company. Right, you take the public data and you just marry it with the base organizational hierarchy data. Then you can say, what are the skills in this division versus this division? How long in the role, right? But then you can go into more and more. Can you get performance review data, or can you just do sentiment analysis on that? Can you get the learning and development data? Can you get what the sellers are doing? So it just is actually, we need all the data up front to make progress. We can take incrementally data from inside the company and deliver value to the employers, because they're in such bad shape. They're still working Excel spreadsheets. If you were to say, find me.
And is that the challenge to adoption? Can you get enough data from other data repositories, like you mentioned Workday and others before, or is there critical data on these spreadsheets that are just hard to get a hold of to make your system come alive?
No, so we don't need most data in spreadsheets, but let's say you're a consulting organization, and you have some bespoke Excel on this consultant worked with these clients, or their strategy or technology or whatever kind of consultant. We can very easily ingest that data and leverage that in delivering value to the customers.
I think this entire class of applications is about to be on a very long data privacy journey. We have all the controls that everyone talked about, but I think the real issue is the court has not really ruled on what rights people actually
Or
have.
the courts, that's the other
That's
problem.
what I'm saying, the
right?
courts. The courts,
all different jurisdictions.
there's not enough case law yet to understand how to interpret these very complex frameworks like GDPR and the other ones in the US and Canada, Asia Pacific, every other places. And so really foundational questions affect this category. So for example, if I have your data and you're completely happy for me to have your data, am I allowed to use that data to improve the product? And to do that, what rights do I have to have as specified literally in the data processing agreement and the master agreements that we have? If you talk to most compliance people, that is actually not a very well understood answer. If you then ask, am I allowed to improve the product that you bought, but because I'm training all of this interesting AI, it might improve other products that my company has. Am I allowed to improve those other products with your data? Again, the answer is not clear.
Yep.
So as these laws mature, as they get more stringent, as people realize how much data vendors like us have in the cloud under our purview, I think we're all going to be on a journey of what it looks like. And a lot of our investment is in infrastructure to manage all those different rights. So we know, for example, how much rights you've given us, and we apply the AI differently, believe it or not, depending on how much rights you've given us. But even there, we have to make decisions, because you can't look at case law and just say, okay, clearly the answer is X, Y, or Z. It's much grayer than that. And I think because AI is about data, this is a foundational piece of what the whole world's going to go through for data privacy.
So, even before we get into this data privacy issue, which I agree with you is coming, there's just the basic idea of data management. Presumably, you're taking data out of other systems of record, and you're bringing it into something we could, kind of call a data lake, and then you got to manage that. And then you're going to add some of these overlays, like the data, kind of history and what you've used in the past to train your models and all. But just take us even down to that infrastructure layer a little bit of what have you learned? I mean, I remember when your company was just starting out, since we're very proud to be investors. It was the early days, but now you must have built up an incredible infrastructure to support all of this.
Yeah, and the hard part, there is a scale problem. We have very, very large customers, so the scale of that data. But actually the hard part is all the privacy and compliance and security controls. So for example, conservative companies, especially again in Europe, want you to be able to answer questions like who had access to Steve's mail and when did they have access? And they want to go further and say, let's make sure that no US citizen had access to my, for example, German data. And so, the data infrastructure is hard.
Yep.
The level of compliance and controls above that is actually where so much of the investment goes. So you can't just implement features. You have to ask the question, how is this going to impact privacy? How is this going to impact security?
Is that your experience too?
So one of the, our experiences, because the case law is not decided, there is a lot of ambiguity and customer specific, even in Europe, on how strictly they interpret it. There are fines on one side, so that's the risk side, but there's a reward side. If you don't make use of all of this data and things, you're going to suffer. You're not going to get ahead on the progress that you are trying to make. Another aspect that is relevant to us, maybe to others, is the use of AI on people decisions. So there is both law in Europe and in the US and New York and other states are coming up, which says you cannot use AI for decision making around employment. So then you got to kind of say, where am I using, and very clear. So it's a dynamically evolving legal landscape. Some of it is not very sensible. Some of it is very sensible. But those are the realities we're going to have to deal with as we build the business.
Let's talk a little bit more about the machine learning itself. Presumably you all have, kind of senior data scientists on board. There's all kinds of state-of-the-art things, natural language processing with transformer models that are, kind of causing people to even rethink the data models they've built in the past. How do you all, as senior leaders in your companies, interact with the data science team? What's the state of the art? What are the things that you're experimenting on? Mike, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So, our data science team, and again, another team that we built early in our company development, the way that we interact with them is really about articulating how our customers use our products, how they manage their workflow, how they run their businesses, so they can use their creativity and their elements to think about ways that the AI and ML can be utilized in order to grow outcomes. So we're really that layer between the customer on how they're executing and how they're running their business and the strategies that they're doing, to our data scientists to that really understand the detailed technology under the covers to really sort of drive these outcomes. So we play that role of sort of educating and understanding, and then also as they start to develop things, we'll give our perspective. We'll test and learn. We learn a lot on our own activities that we do and try to simulate some of the customer activities before anything sort of goes out to the wild. So we're really that translation layer, if you will, of sort of customer requirements and business into the technology.
What's the state of the art for you?
So the state of the art where we are focusing right now is not on the kind of AI that we have in the system and what we can infer, but it is around the use cases. So for example, in talent acquisition, it is different where you say, here is a prospect, right? So I mean, just like, nothing constrains somebody to go to HBCUs and say, I want to hire black candidates. So if similarly we can say we want to find the best talent as prospects, it is okay to use AI to infer your race, ethnicity, whatever else. But if you use that to make a hiring decision, no. So both in what we say in our terms of service to how we use it and what we enable, we had to be thoughtful about that, and that's what we are studying. So use cases rather than data itself. In fact, when I was working with Craig Mundy and helping lead global technology policy at Microsoft, there was a lot of movement around let's restrict data in terms of use cases, because data can be used in so many different ways, and you can't start constraining data just on the basis of data.
Yeah, well, if you've been around Seattle long enough, you've heard Craig Mundy give that talk. And so, Robert, how about you?
Well, I think when we think about the AI, the one key thing is that AI can be incredibly stupid. It can decide Dilbert things. You're like, oh my God, that's what you decided with all this data? That's ridiculous. So we kind of have two kinds of AI in the company. We have AI across many of our features that we know it knows how to get a good answer. So for example, one of the problems that we have to do that actually Outreach has to do as well is take your activity and map it to influence revenue. And that turns out to be a relatively hard AI problem, but we're pretty good at it, and we know we're pretty good at it, and we can get better and better and better. Then there are problems that it's not clear you can get better at, and we have that in our science team, and they're on the cutting edge. So for example, you might want to say, look at all of the reps and figure out what makes this set of reps better than this other set of reps. And the challenge is you can observe some really silly things that happen to be correlated with that data set. It's very easy to do that. And so for the more sophisticated vector-based semantic analyses that we do, that's more in the science team. Once they kind of prove to the world and to the company that it might not be stupid, then we put it back into the regular parts of
the car they drive or something random like that?
Exactly. Well, actually, we used a different AI product. I won't put anybody on the bus. We used a different AI product this was a category that was very hot, probably 6-7 years ago, which was supposed to decide which prospects were the best prospects for a sales team. And we were using this software, and what companies were the best prospects. And what it decided was if you were using a certain website technology, if you built your website on Drupal randomly, that was our best prospects. Why? Because that is what the data set said. Absolutely Dilbert. Not an important insight. You have to be very careful with AI what you learn.
Yeah, that's true. So you introduced this concept of other companies. There's a whole ecosystem out there, and maybe I'll break it down into two buckets. There is the world of the cloud service providers, which are probably, for all of you in different ways, the infrastructure that's helping you enable what you're doing in terms of delivering your intelligent applications. Are they, partner, or are they competitor? And then more broadly out there, I mean, I would imagine there's worlds where Outreach and HighSpot specifically work together, but more broadly, who are the ecosystem players that are your aligned partners out there, and how do you think about sharing, the data and the machine learning aspects with them?
Yeah. Well, for AI, it's really interesting because the cutting edge is mostly in the open source ecosystem, and we can learn from each other, and we contribute, and we learn from that. So for example, one of the problems that we have is if you're in a conference call, it turns out it's very hard for AI to figure out who's talking. It's called the diarization problem, and if you're talking and we just do a natural conversation, we're kind of interrupting each other, it can't figure it out. And so that's cutting edge, and so we'll use research for that. If it's a fairly well understood problem, the challenge is when you get to kind of our scale is that it gets very expensive. So the easiest example is transcription. Fairly well understood problem. Almost every piece of software we use transcribes in various ways, closed captioning. But when you get to a scale where you're doing millions of minutes a day,
pricey.
That actually becomes very problematic on your margins. It actually becomes a line item for your margins. And so that's where you would like to leverage the big players, but probably can't from an economic point of view.
And so have you tried to use like some of the finished services at AWS and or Google or others that, on things like transcription? Or
Yeah, so you start with them and then you work very hard not to use them because it'll literally take points off your margin.
Got it.
Again, at scale. When you're first starting out, it's wonderful, it's easy, you can do that. I mean, you can call Google or Amazon or Microsoft and ask this picture, what city, what's the colors, what's the concepts, I mean, wonderful stuff. You do that 1,000,000 times an hour, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yep. And so do you, just to push this one more, do you then build your services that are your own design services that live on one of those players, but you just, rather than paying for transcriptions, AWS transcription, you just build your own transcription service?
Yes, and it turns out, even though transcription is so common and it's in all aspects of our lives, it's actually a very hard problem.
There you go.
It's very hard to get transcription right. Little things like commas, semicolons, capitalization. Normal people speak in lots of run-on sentences. And so if you're trying to transcribe an actual call, it turns out it's a tricky problem. And yet you can't pay these finished services because they're so expensive.
Anoop, are you finding this as well, or?
Yeah, so for us, actually, I was going to go more on the data side of it. So the infrastructure is less critical. A lot of people have similar infrastructure, whether you go to AWS, GCP, or Microsoft Azure. For us, the interesting partnerships are with the data providers and the APIs. So, how do we work with the Workdays and the SAPs and the Ceridians and all of that? And can you templatize, all of the data that we suck in, and how do you interpret that? Similarly, applicant tracking systems. Similarly, inside your developer systems, your systems. So it is more the data partnerships that are most critical and the interfaces to that for the insights we drive. Then a lot of the AI parts, we use standards that we get from these large service providers, cloud providers.
I'm just curious, does this lead to any go-to-market alignment? Like, are you trying to go jointly sell together where you've maybe taken data from other data partners and built your intelligent application and they want to co-sell with you, or not so much?
No, that's certainly, we are not doing as much of it given our youth as a company. I thought I'll clarify on that side of it. But absolutely, there are great possibilities to partner with these people because 1 + 1 = 3 or 5 when we do things together.
Yeah, we just recently introduced a partnership with AWS, so where you can use sort of buy through AWS, and so that's a partnership that we're continuing to grow and mature, but very similar to Anoop. I think there's interesting partnerships to be made with, especially for us on the activity data and that information, because that activity data ends up getting married with a lot of other data inside of a business. So we're working on a capability to do Snowflake data sharing with customers, which we think is a really super interesting piece of technology. We're working on capabilities to be able to move data in and out of BI systems so that they can combine that with other data and applications. So we have both, like I said, we have both this sort of AI data set, but we've also got this very rich activity data set that people are using to run their business. And there's other activities inside a business that our customers see value in pulling all that information together and using that to help drive their business.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Snowflake, even though the market doesn't seem to like their earnings today, and I think they're down 15% or something in the aftermarket. Incredible company, one that we were delighted to be investors in. Tell me a little bit more about, because to your point there, I mean, I think Snowflake's trying to be more relevant in the intelligent application world, but they're kind of banging heads against what you can do in BigQuery and Google, or what Databricks can do. How are you working with Snowflake? Is that correct?
So they have a data sharing capability where you can share data and combine data if you're both Snowflake customers. So we're enabling that. But we'll be somewhat agnostic in the sense that we'll be able to provide API sets that we can move data between Google Query or sort of the AWS Redshift products and things like that as well. So they just have a little bit different of a take on how to move data between applications, and they've simplified some of that for their customers.
Are your customers becoming more demanding of, like, we want to do this data sharing across workflows?
Yeah, there's we're seeing BI teams as normal, and BI teams that are supporting sales as a business specifically, and they're really driving to build out their own insights. And so we see that that need from our customers and that request from our customers to be able to really really understand the activities and elements that are going on with their selling teams, and to be able to combine that with the different other activities that are that they're tracking inside of their system.
Let's hear from Robert on this too, because it sounds like you guys are
absolutely. Our most sophisticated customers want an entire data lake of all of our data, and then they're going to combine that with other pieces of data. It could be HR data, other things, and then do very sophisticated both data science analyses, or at least do BI on it, bring up a various kinds of dashboards. But they want all the data, and Snowflake and others like it make it easy, because these data sets, I mean, think about it, if you're tracking in all this different information about the employee or the salesperson or anybody else, these data sets are massive, billions of rows.
Yes.
So it's a tricky thing to say, hey, let me share this data with you when it's a billion rows. So do you think, I mean, your background, you understand this concept of abstraction layers, right? So if infrastructure as a service has been kind of the dominant abstraction layer of the last 10 years, is there some kind of data warehouse as a service that cuts across lots of different data types I have as a business? I'm, Nordstrom or whoever trying to run my business. Is that an abstraction layer that we could see coming and to some extent disintermediating the infrastructure as a service? Well, I think that you are absolutely going to see a network effect of data providers, because if lots of the vendors now support, let's just use Snowflake as an example, Snowflake's data sharing, and that drives a lot of their customers to want the data to come through Snowflake, it's literally going to look like a platform network effect. More vendors pushing data in, more customers consuming it means the more vendors come in, and you're going to get that 80-20 that network effects do. I think you're going to definitely see that, because these data sets, again, are so big, and going back to our earlier conversation, privacy and security is so important, and it turns out in that sharing, they actually let you do the security at the row level. This is kind of a detail, but they have very granular security, critically important for the privacy part of the conversation.
Anoop?
So I'm seeing some of that too, where, some of the very largest companies are going and saying, we can do it all ourselves. We can put all these data together. We're going to make use of it. We're going to use your data to build applications. I think many of them will spend a lot of money and fail. Seriously. Because your IT teams are not often the best engineers, the best whatever else, to build applications, to maintain applications. I would trust Robert to build some of those systems for me, or Mike. And so while we do see that trend, I almost from a business side think that whether an attractive customer audience for us is these mega corporations, who have the resources, who think they can do it, versus the smaller, slightly smaller customers, who are even non-tech customers, said, no, I don't want to touch this thing. Give me a great solution that makes it work, and charge them good money, and grow your business that way.
Okay, well that leads me perfectly to my last question. You each have 15 seconds on this. Mike, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
Outside of your own company, of course, what is your favorite intelligent application that you use, kind of out there in the enterprise intelligent application?
I can't pick favorites. No, listen, we have, I'll pick some customer applications or customer service applications. Obviously, that's big in my area. But we've utilized Zendesk very, very well, Yext very well, Forethought very well. Those have all been great applications for us, but there's some really, really cool and interesting applications in this sort of ecosystem, and so we're always constantly looking for ways to drive value with intelligent applications and to give our employees better ways of doing their jobs, and I think that's what it's really all about with this space, and so super excited to see where it goes and see all these new capabilities that are coming out of the ecosystem and start utilizing them to drive value for our organization.
Love it. Anoop, 15 seconds.
So I think of Gong like in Avoma we use, which is where you're transcribing the conversation, you're really learning how you are sharing. Super helpful for us on our sales team on what we do. And you'd asked earlier in the note you sent us about the consumer, and I was thinking about that. And I was thinking Google Maps is pretty amazing on what they can do for you as an intelligent application, bringing tremendous amount of data and giving you the dynamic real-time route to get to the destination.
Works most of the time.
Most of the time.
Robert, you get to bring us home.
For B2B, I think email is getting to be very interesting, where they suggest things, where they nudge you about things you haven't done, because it actually affects every single employee, so I like that. We use Gmail, but I think Outlook's doing the same kind of thing. And then on the consumer side, for me, it's photos. My photo application literally wakes up in the morning and says, by the way, here's your anniversary from 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. Here's a 30-minute reel.
Yes.
Very fun that they're doing that now.
That's very fun. There's lots of intelligent applications. Well, I'm throwing money around here, but there's lots of intelligent applications in this device. So please join me in thanking this amazing panel.